Hello, thank you for joining me. My name is Christian DeLucia. Today's video is on ANOVA, basic terminology, and I'm hoping this is going to be the first in a series of videos on ANOVA. What is ANOVA? ANOVA, or the analysis of variance, is a class of statistical models used to test hypotheses about mean differences. ANOVA was invented by Sir Ronald Fisher, a really important figure in modern statistics. In fact, the F ratio, which is the test statistic from the ANOVA model, is named after Fisher. So the purpose of today's video is to describe some basic terminology associated with ANOVA. The video is at a conceptual level, so we're not really going to dive into the statistics, but I'm hoping that in subsequent videos I'll cover some of the statistical methods used in the ANOVA tradition. To start, let's think of an orienting example. My home discipline is clinical psychology, so let's assume that we were interested in testing whether exposure to psychotherapy would result in lower levels of depression scores following treatment. We can further assume that from 60 individuals seeking psychotherapy for depression, we're going to randomly assign participants to one of three conditions: cognitive behavioral therapy, abbreviated as CBT in the literature; brief psychodynamic therapy, which can be abbreviated BPD; or weightless control condition, which I've abbreviated WLC. And the ends there are consistent with the size of the condition. So 20 individuals in the CBT condition, 20 different individuals in the BPD condition, and yet 20 different individuals in the waitlist control condition. Okay, so let's think of three types of variables in the ANOVA framework: independent variables or factors, dependent variables or outcome variables, and covariates or statistical control variables. The effects of one or more independent variables on a dependent variable are of primary interest in the approach. In experiments, the independent variables are manipulated by the researcher. Dependent variable is the outcome being studied. In the present example, the sole dependent variable is depression. Covariates are statistical control variables. They're variables that the researcher is hoping to control the effects of, at least from a statistical perspective, but they are not typically the focus of the study. Okay, ANOVA models that include covariates are called ANCOVA models, short for the analysis of covariance. On this slide, I give a schematic for factors and levels, and this is something that I notice students often confuse. So remember, we said that independent variables are also factors, so those terms are used interchangeably. In our present example, our factor is psychotherapy, and then subsumed by each factor, we've got the various levels associated with the factor, and we could think of the levels as the different groups associated with the factor. So in our hypothetical example, we've got a single factor psychotherapy. We've got three levels or three groups associated with it: CBT, BPD, or WLC. Okay. Next, I want to talk about factor types. We've got two types of factors: between subjects factors and within subjects factor. When factor levels are made up of independent groups of participants, we call those kinds of factors between subjects factors. Okay. In contrast, when the same group of individuals repeats over the various factor levels, that kind of factor is referred to as a within subjects factor. Okay. As an example, we could think of a medication trial in which a single patient group is exposed to two or three different dosing conditions. Okay. Now let's talk about design types. And so designs that are based on between subjects factors are referred to as between subjects designs. Designs that are based solely on within subjects factors are referred to as within subjects designs. And sometimes you'll see the terms within subjects, and other times you'll see the terms repeated measures. They are used interchangeably. And sometimes we've got mixed designs where we've got one or more between subjects factors and one or more within subjects factors. And so we call those kinds of designs mixed designs, owing to the mixture of factor types. Okay, so in the example, our hypothetical psychotherapy example, we've got a single factor, but we might be interested in designs that have two or more factors, okay? So if we wanted to expand our psychotherapy example, we could say, in addition to the 3 levels of psychotherapy, we might be interested in 2 levels of a second factor, like expectation for treatment success. In those instances, we've got what's referred to as a factorial design, or a design with 2 or more factors. In factorial designs, we can focus on the analysis of the main effects of the various factors, as well as interactions between or among the various factors. Okay. If all main effects and interactions are estimated, the design results in a full factorial model. If only some effects from the total pool of effects are estimated, the design results in what's referred to as a fractional factorial model. Okay, next I want to talk about omnibus tests of significance versus more focused tests of significance. So I have some means and standard deviations here from our hypothetical psychotherapy outcome trial. Let's assume these are depression means on a post-test assessment, meaning that everyone has received treatment, or whatever time has passed in the waitlist condition. Okay. Now, if we run the analysis and we get a significant main effect of psychotherapy, in this case, we've got an omnibus test of significance because we've got 3 levels of our factor. Omnibus significance tests are tied to factors that have 3 or more levels. What the word omnibus means in this context is that the significance test lacks some specificity. Essentially, if we reject the null hypothesis that all population means are equal, we're not exactly sure where the differences might lie. In order to probe those differences, we have to do some additional analyses, which leads me to my next slide, titled Pairwise Mean Comparisons. Typically, when we've got an omnibus test of significance that's significant, we're going to follow it up with a series of pairwise contrasts. So in the present example, we would probably want to estimate all 3 unique pairwise comparisons. We would take the mean in the CBT condition and compare it to the mean in the waitlist condition, a mean of 10 versus a mean of 15. We would also take the mean in the BPD condition, compare it to the mean in the waitlist condition. And then finally, we would compare the 2 means from our 2 active treatments, CBT versus BPD. And here it looks like there isn't much of a difference between our 2 active treatment conditions. Okay. Now, an issue that arises when we follow up an omnibus test of significance with some additional comparisons is something referred to as alpha inflation. Sometimes you'll see the term alpha inflation. Sometimes you'll see the terms family-wise error rate inflation. The idea being, as we conduct additional analyses, our criterion for statistical significance rises above our industry standard of 0.05. Okay. In such instances, researchers will often use an alpha adjustment procedure. There are lots of different adjustment procedures out there. Bonferroni is a common one, and it's the example I give on this slide. And so when we use those adjustment procedures, we're trying to balance statistical power with the increase in alpha error inflation. Okay. On this slide, I make a distinction between univariate ANOVA versus multivariate ANOVA. If a single dependent variable is assessed, the design is said to be univariate in nature. If two or more dependent variables are assessed simultaneously, the design is said to be multivariate in nature. Okay, multivariate analysis variance is referred to as MANOVA. Okay, now on these last couple slides, I want to give you some shorthand for design types. And so if you're reading a results section in a published manuscript where the authors have used ANOVA models as part of the analytical framework, you might see statements like a one-way between subjects ANOVA testing the effects of psychotherapy on depression was statistically significant. And then there's some technical statistical information there. And the way we would read that is we would say F on 2 and 57 degrees of freedom equals 7.4, P equals 0.001, R squared equals 0.21. And then a loose translation for that statement is depression scores from individuals who received one of three kinds of psychotherapy were compared and results were statistically significant, indicating not all population means were equal. Okay, we might also see a statement like a 2 treatment group by 2 time of assessment mixed model ANOVA was tested, in which treatment group was the between subjects factor and time of assessment was the within subjects factor. Okay, note that, excuse me, the numbers in the statement above refer to the levels associated with the factors. For example, there are 2 levels of the treatment group factor, and the words in parentheses are the factor names the authors are using, okay? And then finally, we might see a statement like a 2 treatment group by 2 motivation for treatment by 3 time of assessment mixed model ANOVA was tested, in which treatment group was 1 between subjects factor, motivation for treatment was a 2nd between subjects factor, and time of assessment was the sole within subjects factor. All right, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.